The champagne flute in Carter Whitmore's hand had gone warm, untouched for nearly 20 minutes. He stood by the balcony rail of his south of Broad townhouse, a block from the water, as Charleston's harbor glimmered beneath the fading gold of a spring evening. From inside the soft swell of a string quartet spilled out something elegant, expensive, carefully chosen by his events team. He wasn't listening. People were inside laughing, sipping wine, gliding between floral arrangements and waiters with silver trays. His name floated through the air more like a brand than a person. Whitmore Capital, the man who turned quiet investments into empires, the widower of a marriage that had ended silently, privately 15 months ago. Carter. He blinked, turning slightly. Trent Marlowe, his right-hand man and COO, stepped out onto the balcony with a cautious smile. "You've got 5 people waiting to pitch you something. 3 of them flew in just to shake your hand." Carter raised the glass, considered it, then set it on the stone ledge. "They'll survive." Trent hesitated. "Do you want me to tell them? Tell them I had a headache, a death in the family, or that I was never here?" "Copy that," Trent said with a tight nod, but didn't move. Carter's jaw tightened. "What you ever think about dialing it down, letting people in just a little, I let them in plenty." Carter looked back toward the party, watching his mother, Inez, in a pearl-colored dress, holding court like a governor's wife. They get the brand, the version they paid for. That version doesn't look like he's enjoying his life. That version is tired of pretending. Carter turned, walking inside before Trent could answer. The air was perfumed and heavy, buzzing with polite energy. Women in silk gowns, men in tailored suits. Half of them had worked hard to be here. The other half had been born here and assumed the world would always rise to meet them. That was Charleston. Beauty and history layered over secrets and social ladders. Carter maneuvered through the crowd without touching anyone, all nods and brief eye contact. Everyone smiled too quickly. Everyone wanted something. In the center of the room was a white, lacquered table bearing his company's newest initiative, a scholarship fund for underrepresented students in the tech space. The plaque had his name etched in gold. He hadn't written a single word of the speech about it. A woman approached mid-30s, polished with the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. "Carter, there you are." She touched his forearm like they were old friends. "You've been impossible to find." "I've been right here," he said gently, stepping aside. "I was hoping we could talk. I'm doing a piece for Southern Business and Legacy. We're calling it The Men Who Made the New South." He gave a non-committal smile. "That's a generous title. You're on the short list. Tell them I respectfully decline." "I don't do profiles." Her face faltered. "It's not about ego. It's about legacy. You've built something incredible." "Legacy." He looked past her, his expression unreadable. "Excuse me," he said. He walked straight through the gallery of his home-turned venue and into the library, shutting the door behind him. Finally, silence. The kind that filled a room and pressed against your ears. He exhaled and loosened his tie. 15 months. 15 months since the divorce papers were signed on a rainy Thursday. Since Marissa walked out of their townhouse in silence, taking only what she came with. No drama, no war, just absence. She hadn't asked for $1. She hadn't returned a single call. And he hadn't followed her. People assumed he was cold. Calculating. They weren't entirely wrong. But the truth was simpler. He didn't know how to fix what he never understood how to hold. They had spoken different languages. Hers was emotion presence, little things that felt like big things. His was provision, efficiency, control. Neither of them knew how to translate. He glanced at the mantel where a photo used to sit. Marissa, laughing in the garden hair twisted up in a messy bun, dirt on her cheeks. She'd insisted on planting azaleas herself. You can buy a life, she once told him, but you can't buy soul. That was the day he fell in love with her, and the day he started realizing he might not be able to keep her. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. Then it buzzed again. And again, he frowned, pulling it out. 3 missed calls from Trent. A text. Need you in the office. Now, emergency. Carter straightened. Another buzz. Unknown number. He answered, jaw tight. Mr. Whitmore? Yes. This is Mallory, Mr. Whitmore's executive assistant. Her voice was controlled but uncertain. I'm calling on behalf of Charleston General. There's been a situation. He froze. What kind of situation? There's a woman here named Marissa Hale. She brought in an infant with a high fever. The child's stable, but they're requesting immediate family history. And she listed you. Everything around him went quiet. I'm sorry, she told the attending nurse. Contact Carter Whitmore. He's the father. He sat down slowly, the words catching like glass in his throat. She said that, yes, sir. Is the child, what's the name? Miles. He closed his eyes. 15 months. She'd been gone 15 months, and had never told him she was pregnant. Tell the hospital I'm on my way. He ended the call, stood, walked to the doorway, paused just long enough to grab his car keys from the side table. Outside, the sky was still blue and polite, the kind of Charleston evening people dreamed of visiting. But in Carter's world, something had just cracked wide open, and he wasn't sure who he was walking toward. But he knew one thing without question. He was going to find out. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought matter to me either way. The fluorescent lights in the ER waiting room flickered, like they couldn't decide whether to hum or go out entirely. The air was chilled and dry recycled too many times, like the conversations echoing between worried parents and exhausted nurses. Marissa sat hunched in a molded plastic chair, a thin hospital blanket draped around her shoulders. Her eyes locked on the small double doors that led to the pediatric wing. Her leg bounced. Unconscious, unrelenting. She clutched Miles's stuffed giraffe in her lap, soft, worn, and damp from where he'd chewed the ear nearly clean off. She didn't remember grabbing it when they left, but here it was pressed against her ribcage, like a lifeline. Tanya sat beside her, still in her scrubs, arms crossed, voice low. They said he's stable. You heard the nurse. Breathing's better. Fever's dropping. He's okay. Marissa nodded, but her throat didn't work yet. Not for words. Not for anything but guilt. I should have taken him earlier, she whispered. No, Tanya said firmly. You did exactly what you were supposed to. You knew something was wrong and you didn't wait. Marissa ran her hand over her face, then pulled her long hair into a loose knot. It's not just tonight. It's everything. The rent, the job. I can't keep doing this on my own. Tanya was quiet. Then, you called him, didn't you? Marissa didn't answer right away. She just stared down at the giraffe. I didn't have a choice. Tanya leaned back in her chair and exhaled slowly. You told him about Miles. I told the nurse to contact him. I didn't even call directly. I couldn't bring myself to. After all this time? I know. 15 months of silence. 15 months of keeping her distance, keeping her head down, trying to rebuild a life from nothing, and now one fever had undone all of it. Tanya softened. You think he'll actually show up? I don't know. Her voice cracked. But if he does, I have no idea what I'm going to say. Before Tanya could answer, the elevator chimed. They both turned. And there he was. Carter Whitmore stepped into the waiting area in a tailored navy jacket shirt, open at the collar, no tie. His hair was slightly tousled, like he'd driven fast with the windows down. There was a stillness to him, controlled, measured, but his eyes scanned the room like a man trying to anchor himself in a storm. Marissa stood slowly. Their eyes met. And the floor didn't just shift, it vanished. She hadn't seen him in over a year. Not since the day she signed the papers, handed back the keys, and walked out of the house where she'd learned how quickly love could harden into silence. He looked the same, but he didn't look fine. His eyes were darker now, tired in a way she recognized. Not from lack of sleep, but from carrying weight no one else could see. Tanya stood too, her presence suddenly all steel. Carter's gaze flicked to her, then back to Marissa. He moved closer. His voice came out quiet, but sharp enough to cut the space between them. "Is he okay?" Marissa swallowed hard. "He's stable. The fever's starting to break. They're running more tests." He looked past her toward the pediatric doors. "Can I see him? They're only letting one of us back at a time." He nodded, jaw tight. "You should go." Marissa didn't move. Her hands were trembling, but she tried to hide them in the folds of the blanket. "You came. You named me as the father. I didn't know what else to do." His eyes locked onto hers. "You could have told me." Her throat burned. "I couldn't. Or wouldn't," Tanya stepped forward, voice clipped. Now might not be the time to start that conversation. Carter ignored her. "I had a right to know, Marissa." She felt heat rising behind her eyes. "And what would you have done?" "Sent a check, assigned a handler. I would have shown up." She looked away, but he didn't stop. "You kept my son from me. You didn't want children?" She snapped, her voice a whisper, edged in exhaustion. "You made that perfectly clear every time I brought it up. I didn't want to fail at it." He shot back, voice low and controlled. "There's a difference." The words knocked the wind out of her. She stared at him, searching for the man she once loved, the one she'd watched slowly disappear behind conference calls and silent dinners. He looked away first. Tanya, sensing the tension, took a step back. "I'll grab us some coffee." She left without waiting for permission. Carter sat down in the chair next to Marissa, keeping a careful distance. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Then he said, "Why didn't you tell me she turned the stuffed giraffe over in her hands?" "Because I didn't know how to explain to you that I was pregnant and terrified. That I was standing in a new apartment with nothing but second-hand furniture and a plus sign on a stick. And I was finally breathing for the first time in years. I didn't want to lose that. I wouldn't have taken that from you, no. But you would have tried to control it. You would have turned it into something you could manage." He exhaled. "Maybe. Probably. I wanted a fresh start. For me. For him." His voice broke slightly. "He's my son." She nodded, tears slipping down despite her best effort. "He is. His name's Miles, yeah." He looked down at the giraffe in her lap, then slowly reached out, brushing his hand over its ear. "I didn't know it was possible to feel so much and so little all at once." Her voice was soft. "What do you feel he didn't answer right away?" Then rage, guilt, wonder. All of it. A nurse opened the double doors. Ms. Hale Marissa stood. The nurse smiled gently. "You can come back now?" Carter stood too, but made no move to follow. Marissa hesitated. Then she turned to him. "Do you want to come?" His eyes met hers, guarded, questioning. "I don't want him to meet his father for the first time in a hallway." Carter nodded once. They followed the nurse in silence. Behind them, the automatic doors slid shut, sealing them into something neither of them was ready for. But some doors don't stay closed forever. Some open when you least expect them. And when they do, You have to decide whether to walk back through, or let someone walk through them with you. Miles was asleep when they walked in his small body curled to one side in the metal-railed crib, his chest rising and falling in soft, rhythmic waves. The beeping machines were gentler now, as if even they understood that the worst had passed. A soft blue light from the monitor cast a halo around him, catching on the curve of his cheek. Carter stopped just inside the room, his breath catching in his throat. Marissa walked ahead of him, instinctively smoothing the blanket over Miles's stomach, then brushing a curl from his damp forehead. "He's okay," she whispered more to herself than to him. "He's going to be okay." Carter didn't move. He couldn't. His legs felt heavy, rooted to the floor. All he could do was stare. He wasn't sure what he'd expected, some spark of recognition, some undeniable pull. But nothing prepared him for the surge of emotion rising in his chest. It was terrifying. It was immediate, and it was real. "That's him," he said softly, like he was trying to convince himself he wasn't dreaming. Marissa looked back at him, her expression unreadable. "Yeah, that's him." He stepped closer, the polished soles of his shoes nearly silent against the tile. He moved slowly, cautiously, as if one wrong breath might wake the baby or shatter the fragile peace in the room. "He has your mouth," he said. Marissa looked at Miles, then at Carter. "He has your eyes." Silence fell between them. Not the kind that feels empty, but the kind that holds too much. Carter finally pulled a chair up to the side of the crib and sat down. His hands rested in his lap, clenched. I missed everything he said quietly. Marissa sat in the corner of the room watching him. "You didn't know." "I should have. I should have seen it. I should have known you were going through something when you left." "You knew I was unhappy," she said, not unkindly. "You just didn't ask why. I thought you needed space. I needed you." Those 3 words hit him harder than he expected. He looked up at her, eyes wide, with something close to regret. "I didn't know how to be what you needed. I didn't want perfect, Carter. I wanted present." Miles stirred, murmured something incoherent, and turned his face toward the sound of their voices. Carter held his breath. Then slowly Miles settled again. The quiet returned, but it wasn't comfortable. It was full of questions that didn't have answers yet. "I kept telling myself I was protecting him," Marissa said, voice softer now. "That he didn't need the pressure, the cameras, the family expectations. That you were better from a distance than from inside something you didn't want." "I never said I didn't want a child," Carter replied, leaning forward, elbows on his knees. "I said I didn't want to be my father." That surprised her. He didn't look at her when he said it, just stared at the curve of Miles's tiny fingers. "I grew up in a house with rules instead of warmth, expectations instead of affection. I learned to succeed, not to connect. I thought that's all I had to offer." She watched him carefully. "You offered success. I needed connection. I know that now." For a long moment, they just breathed in the soft, mechanical rhythm of the hospital room. "Do you remember the night I asked you to slow down?" she asked. His head tilted. "Which time? The one after your fundraiser? I was barefoot in the kitchen and you still had on your tuxedo. I told you I was tired of being your +1 and never your partner." He looked away, shame blooming in his chest. "And I poured another drink instead of listening. You looked at me like I was interrupting your plans. And I realized I'd stopped being part of them." The air in the room shifted heavier now. Carter stood and walked toward the window, rubbing the back of his neck. "I thought if I gave you everything, the house, the car, the freedom, you'd stay. I didn't know I was giving you a life you didn't ask for." Marissa's voice was almost a whisper. "I didn't want a lifestyle. I wanted a life." Carter turned around slowly, nodding as if the words were slowly unlocking something inside him. "You were gone," he said, "and I just kept moving, filling every second so I didn't have to feel how empty the house was. How quiet." "I know," she said. "I saw the interviews. The new fund. The articles about your rise, your silence." He looked down. It all felt like noise. They both went still at the same time when Miles stirred again. This time his eyes fluttered open, warm, brown, hazy, searching. Marissa leaned in. "Hey, baby, Mama's here." Miles blinked, then made a soft sound, a half yawn, half cry. Carter stepped closer but stopped himself, afraid to reach, unsure of his place. Marissa noticed. "Do you want to hold him?" He didn't answer at first. "Then can I?" She nodded. She lifted Miles gently and placed him in Carter's arms, adjusting his blanket. Carter stared down, heart in his throat, as Miles nestled into the crook of his arm, eyelids heavy again. "He's warm," Carter said softly, his voice thick. "He fits." Marissa felt something shift in her chest. A fracture she'd buried long ago, one that had kept her safe, began to soften. She watched. Carter saw the way his fingers trembled slightly, the way he blinked against emotion he wasn't used to letting out. This wasn't the man she left. Not completely. But maybe it was the man who'd been buried under all that ambition now rising to the surface. "I don't know what happens next," she admitted. "Neither do I," he said, still watching Miles. "But I want to know him. I want to be here." She looked down at her hands. "I'm not asking for anything, I know. That's why I want to give it." Miles sighed in his sleep, a small noise that echoed louder than anything else they'd said. Outside the hallway, lights dimmed slightly. Nurses passed quietly, the world going on around them. But in that small room, time held still. Marissa leaned back in the chair, suddenly tired but lighter. And Carter, for the first time in a very long time, didn't feel like he was standing on the outside of something. He felt like he was finally being let in. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought matter to me either way. The first gray light of morning filtered through the hospital room's blinds, soft and quiet. Miles was sleeping again now, tucked into a warmer blanket, his tiny hand gripping Carter's index finger. Neither of them had moved in over an hour. Carter sat completely still, afraid that if he shifted, the spell would break. Marissa watched from the padded chair near the window knees, drawn up under her. She hadn't slept. Not really. Her body was tired, but her mind refused to settle. Too much had changed in a matter of hours, years of distance undone by a phone call, and the way Carter had looked at their son. Not like an obligation, not like a shock, like a father. The thought pulled at her in ways she didn't want to admit. She looked at the curve of Carter's shoulder as he held Miles, the way his posture softened the quiet awe in his expression. It was the same man, but something had shifted. Or maybe he was finally showing a version of himself he never let her see. "You don't have to stay," she said softly. He didn't look at her. "I'm not leaving him," she nodded, staring at the floor. "You don't have to stay with me, I mean," she added. His eyes flicked to her, cautious. "That's not why I'm here." Marissa hugged her knees tighter. "Then why are you?" He hesitated, shifting Miles slightly as the baby stirred and resettled. "Because for the first time in a long time," he said quietly, "I'm not thinking about work, or money, or control. I'm just thinking about him." Marissa stared at him. "And what about me?" Carter didn't flinch. He met her gaze directly. "You're the only person who ever saw me," he said. "And you're the only one I ever let down." The words hung in the room like fog, dense, slow to clear. Marissa looked away. Her voice was thin. "You didn't let me down all at once. You did it piece by piece." Carter nodded slowly, absorbing it without defense. I know. She stood and walked over to the crib, brushing Miles' forehead, then looked at Carter. What happens now, I don't know, he admitted. But I want to be in his life. Fully. I want to do it right this time. Marissa crossed her arms, bracing against the wave of emotion rising in her chest. He needs consistency, stability, not visits when it's convenient or photo ops for the press. This has nothing to do with the press. Carter said sharper now. I don't need anyone to know. I just need to be his dad. Her jaw tightened. It's not just about being present in the room, Carter. It's about being present when it's hard, when he's sick, when he cries for no reason, when he makes you late for something important. I can be that, he said, standing now, careful not to wake Miles. Let me prove it. There was a knock on the door. Marissa turned, surprised. Tanya peeked in, holding 2 paper cups of coffee and an arched brow. Did I miss the morning reunion? Marissa exhaled, just in time for it. Tanya stepped inside her gaze, moving from Marissa to Carter, then down to Miles in his arms. Her features softened just a little. Wow, she said quietly, handing Marissa a cup. Didn't think I'd ever see this day. Neither did I, Marissa said, sipping cautiously. Tanya turned to Carter. You planning on sticking around, or was this a one-night redemption arc? Carter didn't flinch. I'm staying. Good. Tanya crossed her arms. Because that little boy doesn't need more men who leave. He needs someone who'll show up even when it's inconvenient, I know, Carter said. And I will. The conviction in his voice made Marissa look at him again. Not the way she had when she first called him. Not with resentment or panic, with uncertainty, and something quieter underneath. Hope. Tanya glanced at her watch. They said he can probably go home later today. Fever's coming down steady. Pediatrician will check in mid-morning. Carter nodded. I'll arrange transport. Marissa blinked. Transport, I figured. You'd need help. I have a driver who can know. She held up a hand. We'll go home the way we came. Quiet, normal, no headlines. Tanya shot her a look but said nothing. Carter didn't argue. Then I'll follow. Marissa looked at him. You don't have to. I want to, he said. I want to see where he lives. Where you live. She hesitated, then gave a slight nod. The hours passed slowly. Miles woke, cried, ate, then dozed again. Doctors came and went. Charts were checked, vitals noted. By early afternoon, they were cleared to leave. Marissa cradled Miles, a diaper bag slung over her shoulder, her coat half-zipped as they stepped out into the cool Charleston air. Carter walked beside her, not ahead. Not behind. Just beside. The sun was low, filtered through the long branches of moss-draped oaks. The city bustled around them, but the quiet between them was thick. Her apartment wasn't far. A walk up on Queen Street, 2 bedrooms, tiny kitchen, creaky wood floors she tried to love, but secretly hated. She hadn't planned on staying long, but life had a way of setting its own rules. When she opened the door, Carter paused on the threshold. It was clean, cozy, worn in places. A basket of laundry by the couch. A stack of unopened mail. Miles's toys tucked into the corner like afterthoughts. It smelled like vanilla and lavender. Carter stood in the middle of the room, absorbing it all. This is where you've been. This is where we've been, she corrected. He turned toward her. Can I come back? Marissa didn't answer right away. Then, this isn't about us, Carter. I know. And I don't want him to grow up thinking love only exists when it's convenient. I don't either. Her voice softened. We're not a family just because we share blood. We have to choose that. I'm choosing it, he said. She looked at him for a long time, the weight of everything they'd been, and everything they might still be sitting between them like a question neither was ready to answer. But maybe they didn't have to answer it yet. Not today. Miles let out a sleepy sigh. And Marissa, with her heart still bruised but not closed, stepped aside and let Carter in. It had been 2 days since Carter stepped into Marissa's apartment, and nothing had gone back to normal because normal no longer applied. Carter showed up again the next morning. He didn't knock hard, didn't act like a guest, just stood there with coffee in one hand and a bag of Miles's favorite rice puffs in the other, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "I didn't know if you'd want me to come," he said. Marissa, still in leggings and a worn college sweatshirt, looked him over from behind the cracked door. Her hair was in a messy knot. She had a burp cloth slung over one shoulder. Her eyes said she hadn't slept well. She opened the door fully. "I didn't say no." That was how it started. Quiet, unsure, but real. Now, on the third morning, she found herself leaning against the kitchen counter, watching Carter on the floor with Miles, who had taken to him faster than she was prepared for. The baby giggled wildly as Carter made ridiculous animal noises with a plush lion. "Is that a tiger or a chainsaw?" she asked, smirking into her coffee mug. Carter grinned up at her. "You ever hear a tiger in real life? I've been to a zoo. That doesn't count. Tigers don't growl the same when they're on exhibit." "Are you comparing parenting to being in a zoo?" He gave her a knowing look. "Aren't we both on display?" Marissa's smile faltered slightly, because that's what it felt like, didn't it? Every hour that passed, every time she saw Carter changing a diaper or wiping spit up from his sleeve without flinching, it chipped away at the image she'd clung to. The man who had once seemed unreachable, always just out of emotional reach, was now here, feeding their son blueberries by hand and humming softly when Miles grew fussy. He was present. But being present wasn't the same as belonging. And that's where the ache lived. Later that afternoon, after Miles went down for a nap, Carter stood in the doorway to the small kitchen arms folded, watching her rinse out bottles. "You haven't asked me about money," he said. Marissa kept scrubbing. "That wasn't a question. I'm offering." She looked up, soap suds clinging to her wrist. "Why now? Because I should have then." She turned off the faucet and dried her hands, choosing her words. "I didn't want to be dependent on you. It's not about dependence. It's about responsibility." She leaned against the sink. "We didn't sign custody papers, Carter. There's no court order, no shared bank account. We're walking this line and it's paper thin. If I take money from you, it changes things." He moved closer, voice low. "So does pretending I'm not already part of his life. I'm not pretending. I'm protecting." There it was again, that wall between them, the one she built out of necessity, not resentment. Carter nodded slowly. "Then tell me what I can do." "Be consistent," she said. "Not just in showing up, but in staying." She didn't realize her voice had tightened until she heard it. "Because I can't afford to unravel every time you decide to disappear again." Carter swallowed hard. "I'm not going anywhere. You said that once before. Then you buried yourself in work and left me having dinner alone 5 nights a week. That was before, Miles. Before I understood what I was losing." She looked at him. Really looked. "Do you understand now?" His voice cracked. "I'm starting to." Just then a knock came at the door. Marissa glanced at the clock. "That's early." She opened the door to find Inez Whitmore Carter's mother, dressed in her usual understated pearls and pale linen. She looked as though she'd walked out of a Southern Living magazine. Controlled, crisp, untouchable. "Marissa?" she said with a tilt of her head, a smile that barely touched her eyes. "May I come in?" Marissa blinked. I wasn't expecting you." Clearly. Carter appeared behind her. Mother Inez gave her son a cursory nod. "I was in the area." Marissa stepped aside, unsure what else to do. Inez stepped into the living room, taking it in as if it were a listing she was trying to price. Her eyes landed on the worn couch, the scattered toys, the corner bookshelf, leaning slightly to one side. "So this is where my grandson is being raised," she said, fingers lightly grazing the edge of a side table. Marissa stiffened. "It's not much, but it's ours." Carter moved between them subtly. "Why are you here?" "I wanted to meet him," Inez said smoothly. "I think I have a right to." "You had 15 months, Marissa said, arms crossed. "I didn't know he existed. That's hardly fair." Marissa stood her ground. Neither did Carter, and he didn't show up with judgment. "I'm not judging. I'm observing." Carter's voice sharpened. "Mother." Inez gave a small sigh. "I simply want what's best for the child. I'm not here to argue." "He's sleeping," Marissa said, "and we're not having this conversation in front of him." Inez looked at her, finally giving her full attention. "You're raising my grandson in a walk-up, working 2 jobs, no insurance. We're doing just fine," Marissa snapped. Carter stepped in. "That's enough." Inez blinked, surprised. "Excuse me, this isn't your decision. It never was." There was a long silence. Inez's voice dropped to something softer. "You're a Whitmore, Carter. That boy is a Whitmore. There are expectations." "No," he cut in. "There's only one. That we love him." Inez stared at him, unreadable. Then she turned to Marissa. "Would you allow me to visit him sometime?" Marissa nodded slowly, though her shoulders stayed tight. "When the time is right." "Good," Inez said, brushing imaginary lint from her sleeve. "I'll take your lead." When she left, the air felt lighter, but the tension lingered. Marissa sank onto the couch. "That woman scares me." Carter rubbed his face. "She scares everyone. Does she still think you're going to fix everything with money and press releases?" He didn't answer. Marissa looked at him. "Because if she does, you're going to have to choose who you're building this family for." And this time he heard her. Really heard her. And he knew whatever came next, he had to get that answer right. The next morning, Marissa woke up before the sun. Not because of Miles, he was still asleep in his crib, gently snoring, cheeks flushed with baby warmth, but because her mind wouldn't let her rest. She sat at the kitchen table, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, the city outside still wrapped in that blue-gray softness that came just before dawn. Carter had texted late the night before. "Let me take you both to the aquarium tomorrow. Miles will love it. You used to love it. Breakfast first, just the 3 of us." She stared at the message longer than she meant to, reading it over and over. Simple words. But they felt heavy. The idea of just the 3 of us was dangerous, too tender, too close to a version of life she had already mourned. She didn't reply. Now, as the light filtered in, she sipped coffee from a chipped mug and tried to breathe. But the truth settled around her like fog. Carter wasn't leaving. Not this time. And part of her didn't want him to. A knock on the door pulled her back to the present. She checked the time, 6:48 a.m. Another soft knock. Polite, not urgent. She opened the door slowly. "Hey," Carter said. He stood there, holding a brown paper bag, hair still damp from a shower dress shirt open at the collar. "I didn't want to assume you'd say yes, so I just showed up with bagels." Marissa blinked. "You drove across town before 7 a.m. to bring carbs." "Technically, I had them delivered to my car, so, yes." She couldn't help the small laugh that escaped. "You're lucky I'm awake." He stepped in as she moved aside. "Wasn't sure you would be." Miles stirred from the nursery, soft sounds echoing down the short hallway. "I'll get him," Carter offered, already moving. Marissa watched as he picked up their son with a quiet gentleness she still wasn't used to seeing. Carter's voice was a whisper, soothing, warm. "Good morning, bud. You ready to eat everything in the fridge today?" By the time Carter brought him into the kitchen, Miles was wide-eyed and grinning arms flailing in approval at the sight of his father and the bag of bagels. Marissa poured another cup of coffee and slid it toward Carter as he strapped Miles into the high chair. So she said, cautious, "You want to take him to the aquarium, I do." "Why?" "Because he's never been. And because you loved it." She paused. "You remembered that he looked up. I remember everything." She tried not to let that land too hard in her chest. "It's not a date, Carter. I know. And this doesn't mean it's not about us." Right. But something about the way he said it made her question if he meant it. Because the way he looked at her like he was still searching for pieces of the woman he lost didn't feel neutral. They ate in near silence, save for Miles babbling between bites of banana. Carter leaned over now and then to wipe his chin or pick up a spoon flung dramatically to the floor. "You're good with him," Marissa said quietly. Carter looked surprised. "Thanks. It's just, I never saw this version of you before. I didn't know it was in me," he admitted. "Or maybe I buried it under too many hours at the office." Marissa gave a soft, wry smile. "Buried is one word for it. I regret that he said voice dipping. More than I know how to say." She didn't answer. Instead, she stood and started clearing plates. Carter watched her, the familiar motion pulling at something deep inside him. It looked so natural, her in the kitchen sunlight catching in her hair, humming faintly under her breath. This was the life he missed while chasing things that never hugged him back. He stood too. "Can I ask you something?" She looked over. "You just did." He gave a dry chuckle. "Why didn't you come back? Not to me, but just to tell me. About him." She leaned against the counter, the question sitting between them like a fragile vase. One wrong move and it would shatter. I was angry, she admitted. But more than that, I was scared. Of what it would mean. Of what you'd try to control. I needed space to raise him my way. I wouldn't have tried to take him. You say that now, but I didn't trust you to let go of power. And, honestly, I didn't trust myself not to fall back into you. That stopped him." She looked up, meeting his gaze. "You were always the gravity in the room, Carter. I could never breathe when you were near." And now he asked, voice low. "Now I'm learning how to stand." He stepped closer, not touching her, just narrowing the space. "I don't want to pull you down. I want to hold you steady." She exhaled sharply, eyes flicking away. "Don't say things like that." "Why not?" "Because I might believe you." They stood there for a long, loaded moment, neither willing to step away first. Then Miles made a sudden, delighted noise, flinging yogurt at the wall. Carter looked over and laughed. And the moment's gone. Marissa shook her head, smiling despite herself. Welcome to parenthood. He helped her clean up the mess, no complaints, no suits to ruin. They left for the aquarium late morning, walking through downtown with Miles bundled in the stroller, chattering nonsense to the trees and traffic. The day was bright, the air cool, and for once it felt simple. Easy. At the shark tunnel, Carter lifted Miles onto his shoulders, while Marissa watched them from a few steps back. A stranger passed by and smiled. "You two make a beautiful family." Marissa froze. Carter didn't respond, just reached for her hand. She didn't stop him, but she didn't hold back either. She let his fingers rest there for a second, then slipped hers away gently. Not yet. And he understood. Because some things, if they're going to last, can't be rushed. They have to be chosen. Over and over. One ordinary day at a time. The following Monday brought with it a cruel kind of stillness, the kind that waits for decisions to be made. Carter hadn't stopped showing up. Since the aquarium, he'd been around every day bringing groceries, holding Miles during his fussy spells, even fixing the wobbly leg on the coffee table without being asked. He didn't push. He didn't make declarations. But he was present. And that was exactly what unsettled Marissa most. He was being everything she used to beg him to be. Thoughtful, steady, attentive. But now that he was here, now that he was everything she thought she wanted, she couldn't tell if her heart was finally healing or simply being fooled again by hope wearing a better suit. She stood at the sink, washing bottles, when Tanya walked in, the scent of espresso trailing behind her. "You've got that faraway look," Tanya said, dropping her purse on the table. "Either you're writing poetry in your head or you're spiraling again." Marissa laughed softly. "Little of both." Tanya leaned against the counter. "You gonna tell me what's going on with Carter, or do I have to guess based on the ridiculous number of bagel wrappers in your trash?" "He's different," Marissa said, not looking up. "But I don't know if that means anything." Tanya raised a brow. "He's different now, or just trying to look like he's changed? That's the question, isn't it?" Marissa sighed. "He's good with Miles. Better than I expected. And he listens now." But Marissa dried her hands and turned to face her. "But I don't know how to trust it. Part of me wants to believe people can change. The other part remembers crying in the dark next to a man who couldn't even see I was drowning." Tanya stepped closer. "You can let him show up without giving him your whole heart again. Those things aren't the same." "I know. It just doesn't feel that simple." Tanya smiled. "It never is." That afternoon, Carter showed up again, this time, wearing jeans, a gray sweater, and holding a manila folder under one arm. "I come bearing paperwork," he said, setting it on the counter. Marissa eyed it. "What is that, legal forms?" "Voluntary paternity acknowledgement. It's not custody. Just paperwork that makes it official on paper that I'm his father." Her eyebrows lifted. "You had that drawn up already. I wanted to take the pressure off you. You don't have to do anything with it right now. I didn't want to assume anything. But I wanted to be clear about what I'm willing to commit to." Marissa walked around the counter slowly, arms crossed. "You sure you want this? I've never been more sure of anything." She looked down at the folder, then back at him. "You understand this doesn't come with visitation rights or shared decision-making. This is just a name, I understand. And if I say no right now, I'll wait, and I'll keep showing up, because this isn't about proving a point. It's about showing him that I'm not just a visitor in his life." She stared at him for a long moment, then finally nodded. Okay, you'll think about it. Okay, you can leave it. I'll read it." He gave a small smile and set it down carefully, then glanced at the living room. "Can I hang out for a bit? I brought that book you said he liked." Marissa exhaled and motioned toward the floor. "Knock yourself out." The rest of the day passed in moments. Carter reading to Miles while Marissa cleaned, Carter fixing the squeaky cabinet hinge, Carter folding laundry without being asked. By the time evening settled in, she found herself staring at him as he leaned over Miles's crib, humming the lullaby he'd memorized from 2 nights before. The same one she used to hum during midnight feedings. The one that made Miles' fingers relax his brow, unfurrow his breath slow. Carter turned to find her watching him. "What?" She shook her head. "Nothing. Just didn't expect this to be what the beginning of peace looked like." He smiled. "Feels like peace to me." They stood in the hallway outside Miles's room for a moment, neither rushing to break the silence. "I was thinking Carter said maybe this weekend we could take him to Folly Beach. He hasn't seen the ocean, has he?" Marissa shook her head. "Not yet. I'd like to be there when he does." She studied him. "You've got a lot of plans lately. I've had a lot of time to think. And now, Now I want to do more than think." Her voice was careful. "And what about the rest of your world? The board meetings, your investors?" "The press. I've already told my team to stop scheduling anything past 4 p.m. I'm shifting things." She blinked. "You did. I can't get this wrong, Marissa." "Not again." He took a slow step toward her, not touching, but closer. "I know I don't have the right to ask for anything more. But if there's a door still open between us, even just a crack, I'll be here waiting." She inhaled, unsure if the tears rising were from relief or fear. Maybe both. "You can't just come back and fix everything by being present now. It doesn't erase what was lost." "I'm not trying to erase it," he said softly. "I'm trying to write something better on what's left." A long pause settled between them, deep and full of all the things they hadn't said. She didn't reach for him, but she didn't step back either. "You should go," she whispered. "It's late." He nodded, stepping past her. At the door, he paused. "I'll see you both tomorrow." "Yes." She closed the door behind him, gently locked it, and leaned against it, eyes shut, breath held. Outside, Carter stood on the sidewalk, the evening air cool against his skin. He looked up at the apartment window. One light still glowed. He didn't smile, but his chest lifted slightly, because this time he wasn't walking away. And this time she hadn't asked him to. Saturday morning came with a clear sky, the kind that dared you to waste it indoors. Marissa stood by the front window holding her coffee and watching the light stretch across the hardwood floor. Miles babbled from his playpen, his voice a sweet and steady rhythm in the background. She still hadn't signed the paternity papers. They sat unopened on her kitchen counter, anchored under the weight of the fruit bowl, as if oranges and bananas could hold down the magnitude of what it meant. The knock on the door came exactly when she expected it. Carter. Again. He was consistent, punctual, and now somehow seamlessly woven into her mornings. "Ready for the beach?" he asked, grinning as he stepped inside. His hoodie was casual, his hair slightly tousled. It was the version of him she used to imagine existed when he was away in boardrooms, comfortable, grounded human. Miles squealed when he saw him. Carter scooped him up and spun him gently, laughing. "There's my guy." Marissa tried not to smile. "You brought sunscreen." He held up a bag. "Sunscreen, snacks, extra clothes, backup pacifier, and a blanket. I've been properly trained by Google and 3 YouTube moms." She laughed, shaking her head. "All right, you passed. Let's go." They drove in Carter's SUV this time, he had insisted. "It's got more space, and if we're being honest, your car seat situation makes me nervous." The drive to Folly Beach took just under 30 minutes, but it passed like seconds. Carter played a mellow playlist in the background, and Marissa caught herself glancing at him more than once. The way his hand rested on the wheel, the way he glanced at Miles in the rear-view mirror, like it was second nature. It was unnerving how natural this felt. The beach wasn't crowded still early enough in the season that most tourists hadn't descended yet. A few families, some joggers, a couple walking hand in hand near the water's edge. They found a spot near the dunes and laid out the blanket. Marissa settled Miles in the shade of the umbrella and sat down beside him, toes curling into the cool morning sand. Carter stood for a while just watching the waves. His hands were in his pockets, his shoulders relaxed. She studied the line of his profile, the soft way the sun caught his jaw, and remembered how much time she used to spend just looking at him before everything got complicated. "Penny for your thoughts?" she asked. He turned eyes warm. "It's been a long time since I stood still and felt nothing pulling me." She arched a brow. "That a good thing it's a miracle?" He sat beside her close enough to feel not close enough to touch. They both watched Miles dig into the sand with a bright blue plastic shovel. "He's happy," Carter said softly. He's resilient. He gets that from you. Marissa smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. After a beat, she asked, "What was it like growing up the way you did? With all that money, all those expectations?" He let out a breath the kind people only release when they haven't talked about something in years. It was polished, impressive, cold. I learned early how to read a room, but not how to read people. I could win negotiations before I learned how to apologize. She looked at him. That's honest. I didn't say it to impress you. You didn't. That made him laugh. He leaned back on his elbows, looking up at the sky. When you left, he said quietly, I didn't chase you because I thought I was doing you a favor. Like my absence would hurt you less than my presence. Her voice was a whisper. And now I know better. You didn't need me to vanish. You needed me to show up and grow up. She didn't answer. Instead, she reached over and brushed sand off Miles's cheek, her fingers lingering. I almost told you, she murmured, when I found out I was pregnant. I picked up the phone 3 times. What stopped you, I could still hear your voice in my head, saying you weren't ready, saying kids weren't part of the plan. And I was so tired of plans. Carter sat up straighter, his eyes never leaving her. You know, I spent years designing buildings that touched the sky, he said, but none of them felt like home. She glanced at him. And this feels like home. The air between them thickened, too many emotions fighting for space. Miles suddenly reached toward Marissa, demanding attention, babbling nonsense as he grabbed her arm. She laughed, pulling him into her lap. All right. You win. Carter smiled, but there was something unreadable in his eyes. They stayed until the sun began to dip lower, and the wind picked up off the water. On the way back to the car, Miles fell asleep in Carter's arms, his head nestled against his father's chest, like it had always been there. Marissa unlocked the door, watching as Carter gently lowered him into the car seat, buckling him in with practiced hands. She leaned against the frame. You're good at this. He looked up. I'm trying. She hesitated. When's the last time you were in a real relationship? He blinked. Does the divorce count? I mean, since then. He shook his head. I've been busy learning what kind of man I don't want to be. She watched him close the door and come around to her side. He didn't reach for her, but he stood close. I'm not asking you for a second chance, he said. I'm asking for one honest conversation at a time. However long that takes. She searched his face, trying to find the catch, the angle. But all she saw was the man she used to love, older now, maybe wiser. Definitely quieter. Okay, she said softly. One at a time. As they drove away, the last light of the day settled on the beach behind them, and the future, uncertain as it was, didn't feel quite so distant anymore. Tuesday evening rolled in with a soft drizzle, the kind Charleston wore like a hush. The sound of raindrops tapping on the windows filled the quiet in Marissa's apartment, where the lights were low, and Miles had just drifted to sleep after an hour-long battle with a teething toy. Marissa sat on the edge of the couch, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders, flipping through her phone out of habit, not interest. Carter hadn't texted today. It wasn't unusual they weren't in that place. Not officially. Not yet. But after weeks of constant presence, the absence hummed louder than she wanted to admit. A knock at the door made her jump slightly. She wrapped the blanket tighter, and opened it. Tanya stood there damp from the rain, holding a box of takeout and 2 sodas. Don't ask questions. I come bearing carbs. Marissa smiled and stepped aside. You read my mind. 10 minutes later, they were cross-legged on the floor cartons open between them. Tanya twirled noodles around her fork, watching Marissa closely. So, You and the billionaire. Marissa rolled her eyes. Don't start. I'm not starting. I'm observing. Like David Attenborough, but for emotionally complex reunions. Marissa chuckled. We're figuring things out. Slowly. Carefully. Tanya tilted her head. Carefully like don't touch the burner, careful, or carefully like maybe I could touch the burner and not get hurt this time. More like I'm standing in the kitchen deciding if I even want to cook again. Tanya leaned back, nodding. That's honest. Marissa poked at her food. It's just, every time I start to believe what I see in him now, I remember the man he used to be. And that man left me alone more nights than I can count. People change, I know, but I don't know if I've changed enough to trust that. There was a pause. The kind that only happens between people who've seen each other fall apart and still stayed close. You don't have to have all the answers, Tanya said gently. But if it's making you feel more anxious than at peace, that's your gut trying to speak. Before Marissa could respond, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Carter, still at the office. Late meeting. I miss you both. Just wanted to say that. She stared at it, thumb hovering. Tanya peered over. What did he say? Marissa read it aloud. Tanya gave her a look. That man is trying. I know, but I don't know what to say back without saying too much. Tanya reached over and closed the takeout box. Then say just enough. Marissa typed slowly. We missed you too. Hope the meeting went well. She hit send, then set the phone aside. The next morning, Carter showed up again, 2 coffees. A quiet smile, eyes slightly tired. Marissa opened the door, still in pajamas, and raised an eyebrow. You working from my doorstep now? He gave a soft laugh. Thought I owed you both some FaceTime after yesterday. You don't owe me anything, Carter. I know, but I still want to give it. She stepped aside and let him in. Miles squealed when he saw him, legs kicking in his jumper like he'd won the baby lottery. Hey, Bud, Carter said, kneeling down to tickle him. You give your mom a hard time last night. Marissa smiled faintly. He was good. Just clingy. Can't blame him. Carter looked up at her. Neither can I. She swallowed the lump forming in her throat. Over breakfast, things felt oddly calm, familiar, but not forced. Marissa watched as Carter fed Miles tiny bits of scrambled egg, while humming under his breath. You ever get scared? She asked, almost too quietly. Carter looked up. Every day. No, I mean really scared. Like you might not be enough for this. He was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded. All the time. But I've realized being scared isn't a reason to run. It's a reason to stay. Her eyes lingered on his. You never used to think like that. I never had anything to lose before. They finished breakfast in silence, the weight of honesty filling the space between them. Later that afternoon, Carter invited her to visit the community garden his foundation had helped restore, a small, quiet place tucked between 2 historic buildings near the Battery. She hesitated at first, but said yes. It felt like the kind of neutral ground they both needed. When they arrived, Carter led the way down the gravel path, pointing out herbs and vegetables, sharing small stories about the kids who came to help after school. His face lit up in a way she hadn't seen since their early years. This was your idea, she asked, crouching beside a row of tomato plants. Mine and Mrs. Dunley's. She's 81 and knows more about soil than most scientists. Marissa smiled. This place is beautiful. So, are you when you're not bracing for disappointment? He said, voice gentle. She looked up at him, startled. Carter knelt beside her. I know I broke trust, Marissa. Not with a single betrayal, but with 1,000 small neglects. I can't undo that. But I can rebuild something new brick by brick if you'll let me. She didn't speak for a long moment. Then she whispered, I want to believe you. Then believe me. Slowly, he said. I'll wait. They stood brushing off their hands. Carter reached out and held hers. Not tight, not possessive. Just steady. For the first time in a long time, she didn't pull away. Friday morning came with a light breeze, the kind that fluttered through Charleston's cobblestone alleys and carried the scent of wisteria down from porches lined with rocking chairs. Marissa stood on her small balcony, cradling a mug of coffee, and watching Miles through the glass door as he stacked blocks in the living room, completely absorbed in his own small world. She was beginning to feel something she hadn't let herself feel in a long time. Hope. Not the reckless, sweeping kind, but a slow, cautious warmth like a door left slightly ajar, letting in light after too long in the dark. There was a soft chime from her phone. Carter. Got something to show you tonight. Just us. You free, her thumb hovered over the screen. She stared at those 3 words, just us, for a moment too long. It wasn't a demand. It wasn't even an invitation with strings. Just a gentle nudge. A suggestion that maybe the story they'd started wasn't quite over. She replied, Marissa Ware Carter. You'll see. I'll pick you up at 6. He didn't follow it up with a smiley or a heart. Just left it there like he knew she needed space even when he was offering something more. At 5:45, Tanya popped her head into the apartment, already guessing what was happening without needing to ask. You look nervous, she said, tossing her keys on the counter. I'm not, Marissa said too quickly. Tanya smirked. That dress says otherwise. Marissa glanced down at the soft navy wrap dress she hadn't worn since before Miles was born. It's comfortable. It's flattering. And you did your hair. I didn't do my hair. I just didn't leave it in a messy bun for once. Exactly, Tanya said, crossing her arms. You're going on a date. It's not a date. You shaved your legs, Mar. Marissa narrowed her eyes. Go home. Tanya laughed all the way to the door. Have fun, not feelings. At 6 p.m. on the dot, Carter pulled up outside this time in a vintage green convertible that looked straight out of a movie, clean, understated with character. She stepped out into the dusk, holding her light jacket, and raised a brow. New car, old car. I've had it for years. Just never had a reason to drive it. She slid into the passenger seat as he held the door. So I'm the reason, he smiled, pulling away from the curb. The best kind. They drove in comfortable quiet for a while, the wind teasing her hair, the soft hum of jazz playing from the speakers. He didn't say where they were going, but she didn't ask. About 20 minutes later, they pulled up to a narrow side street near the historic district. The buildings were old, but lovingly preserved with warm lantern-style lights and ivy climbing the walls. He parked and opened her door. This way. He led her into a small courtyard behind a row of townhomes. In the center was a garden strung with fairy lights. At the far end, a table for 2 had been set with candles and simple white linens. She stopped, stunned. Carter? He turned hands in his pockets, almost shy. It used to be a public garden. My company bought the building behind it for renovation. When we realized this space wasn't being used anymore, I asked the city if we could bring it back. It took 6 months of permits. She looked around slowly. It's beautiful. I thought maybe this time, he said quietly, we could sit somewhere peaceful, without interruption, without expectations. She swallowed hard. They sat. And for a while, they just talked. About Miles. About books they never finished reading. About the neighborhood bakery she loved that he'd never tried. About how it felt to lose things quietly like trust and time, and wonder if they could ever be found again. Carter listened more than he spoke. And when he did speak, it was thoughtful. Measured. Not the man who used to fill silences with solutions, but the man learning how to hold space instead of trying to fix it. Halfway through dinner, He reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. "I want to show you something," he said, rising and gently tugging her with him. They walked to a small gate on the other side of the courtyard. Beyond it was a narrow staircase that led up to the rooftop of the adjacent building. When they reached the top, the city spread out beneath them church steeples. In the distance, the sound of waves faintly echoing off the harbor. Marissa's breath caught. "It's my favorite view," he said. "But I never shared it before." She looked at him. He wasn't doing this for show. There were no cameras, no grand speeches, just Carter, honest, present, vulnerable. "I kept thinking," he said, "about how we ended, and how fast everything went quiet after that. I don't think I really heard silence until you were gone." She said nothing. "I was scared," he admitted. "Not of being alone. I was scared that I'd already become the man I never wanted to be, that I couldn't come back from it." Her voice came softly. "And now I'm not trying to get back what we had, Marissa. I'm trying to build something from where we are." She blinked, hard eyes burning. "What if I'm still learning how to trust you?" He stepped closer. "Then I'll keep showing you." She stood still, her heart loud in her ears. The breeze moved between them, gentle but real. Finally, she nodded. "Okay," she whispered. "Show me." He leaned forward not to kiss her, but to rest his forehead against hers. Just that. Enough. For now. The following week passed like a gentle current, steady quiet, almost too easy. Carter began stopping by more in the evenings, bringing takeout or helping with bedtime routines. He'd taken to reading Miles a short book, while Marissa folded laundry nearby, half listening, half studying him, like she still wasn't sure this version of him would stay. And to his credit, Carter never asked for more. No pressure, no grand promises. Just presence. One night after a warm dinner and a soft goodbye, Marissa found herself standing in the kitchen long after he'd gone. The house still, the air filled with the faint scent of his cologne. She reached for the paternity papers still tucked beneath the fruit bowl and ran her thumb along the edge. Maybe it was time. But just as quickly as she considered signing, her phone buzzed with a message she didn't expect. From Inez Caldwell. "We need to talk. In person. Tomorrow morning 9 a.m. My place." She stared at the name. Her ex-mother-in-law. She hadn't heard from Inez since the divorce. Not directly. And never warmly. The next morning, Marissa stood in front of the grand, white-columned Caldwell estate in the historic south of Broad neighborhood, her nerves a tight knot in her stomach. The wrought iron gate creaked as she stepped through, greeted by silence and neatly trimmed rose bushes. Inez opened the door herself. "Marissa," she said, crisply stepping aside. "Come in." The interior was exactly as Marissa remembered, immaculate cold, filled with too many chandeliers and not enough warmth. They sat in the sunroom surrounded by high-backed chairs that were somehow both elegant and deeply uncomfortable. "I won't waste your time," Inez said, crossing her legs and resting her manicured hands on her knee. "I understand Carter has inserted himself into your life again." Marissa held her gaze. "He's trying to be involved in Miles' life." "And what is it you want?" Marissa blinked. "Excuse me, I'm asking plainly, dear. Are you hoping for reconciliation? Or is this a test to see how long he'll stick around?" The question hit like ice water. Marissa sat straighter. "I want what's best for my son." Inez's lips pressed together in a polite but pointed smile. "Of course. But I hope you understand that Carter's time is not a limitless resource. He has a company to run, a reputation to maintain. Are you suggesting Miles is an inconvenience? I'm suggesting that Carter's generosity has limits, and I would hate to see your expectations exceed what's realistic." Marissa stared at her, stunned. Generosity. He's his father. Inez's smile thinned. "You're forgetting the world he comes from." Carter was groomed for leadership, not parenthood. Marissa rose slowly. If you invited me here to remind me of my place, you're wasting your breath. I invited you here to remind you that your decisions now don't just affect you. If Carter begins making emotional choices, the board will notice. His investors will notice. There are consequences, Marissa. Not all of them pretty. Marissa swallowed her anger. Maybe that's why he's changing, because he finally understands that being a man means facing those consequences instead of hiding behind power. She walked to the door, pausing only once. Don't mistake my kindness for passivity, Inez. I may have been quiet when I married into this family, but I'm not that woman anymore. Then she left the door, clicking softly behind her. Outside, she stood on the steps, breathing in the Charleston humidity, like she needed to remember where she was, who she was. She pulled out her phone. Marissa, we need to talk. Today. Carter responded almost immediately. Carter. Everything okay, Marissa? Not yet, but it will be. That afternoon they met at the garden. Same table, same string lights swaying in the late spring breeze. Carter arrived, looking concerned. What happened? She sat down slowly, hands folded. Your mother called me. He exhaled, jaw tightening. What did she say? She thinks I'm a distraction. That you're too important to waste time playing house. His expression darkened, but he stayed silent. I told her I'm not the same woman I was during our marriage. I thought you should hear that too. Carter leaned forward. I already know. No, I don't think you do, she said softly. Back then I kept shrinking to fit into your world. Quiet dinners, fundraisers, smiling on cue. I thought being easy to love meant being less of myself. And now I need to know that if we move forward even slowly, you're not just showing up for Miles. You're showing up for me, the real me, the one who argues, who pushes back, who won't disappear behind your shadow again. Carter looked at her for a long time. Then he said, I don't want the version of you who made herself small. I want the one sitting across from me now. She exhaled the tightness in her chest, easing. And your mother, I'll handle her, he said simply. She doesn't get to write this chapter. A long silence stretched between them, warm and still. Marissa reached into her purse, pulled out the folder and placed it on the table between them. Carter's eyes widened slightly. You signed it today. After I left her house. He didn't move to grab it, just looked at her like something sacred had passed between them. Thank you, he said, his voice low. For what? For believing in who I'm becoming, not who I was. She smiled gently. Don't make me regret it. I won't, he whispered. The wind shifted slightly, brushing her hair back, and for the first time since their marriage unraveled, Marissa didn't feel like she was picking up the pieces. She felt like she was rewriting the story. It was nearly midnight when Marissa sat at her kitchen table, staring at the manila folder still resting in her bag. The paternity paperwork was official now. Signed, filed, done. But her thoughts weren't circling the legalities anymore. They were circling Carter, the garden, the rooftop. His voice when he said, I don't want the version of you who made herself small. She rested her chin on her hand, exhausted, but unable to sleep. Outside the street was quiet. Charleston at rest. Miles had gone down early, maybe sensing the emotional weight hanging in the air. The knock on the door was unexpected, but not surprising. She didn't hesitate. When she opened it, Carter stood there, hands in his coat pockets, eyes searching hers like he was waiting for a sign he wasn't sure would come. I couldn't sleep, he said simply. She stepped aside. Me neither. He walked in slowly, pausing to look around, like everything had changed, even though nothing had moved. He glanced toward the hallway where Miles slept, then back at her. I don't know how to explain it, he said, voice low. But tonight it felt different. Like something finally shifted. It did, Marissa replied. You're officially his father now. On paper. He nodded, but that wasn't what he meant. She could see it. I thought it would feel like victory, he said. But it feels like responsibility and peace at the same time. Marissa leaned against the counter. That's what parenthood feels like most days. He smiled softly, then sobered again. I've spent so much of my life chasing things I thought mattered: titles, deals, headlines, but the only thing that's ever made me feel whole is what's happening right here. With you. With him. She didn't respond. She just let the words sit there. Real, unpolished, unrehearsed. Carter stepped closer, carefully watching her face. I'm not rushing anything, he said gently. But I needed you to know my life doesn't feel worth building unless it includes you. Both of you. Her throat tightened. You're saying all the right things, she whispered. But you've said them before, Carter. You said them when we first married, when we bought our first home, when you promised to be there and then missed every milestone. I know, he said, pain flickering behind his eyes. But back then I thought showing up meant being successful. I thought if I just worked harder, earned more, built bigger, it would all somehow equal love. And now I know that showing up means changing diapers, holding hands in silence, being around for the messy, inconvenient parts. She studied him. Really studied him. The lines around his eyes were deeper, his posture more grounded. There was less ego in his voice now, more truth. Still part of her bristled. Your mother still doesn't believe I belong in your world. I don't care what she believes, he said instantly. You did once, I don't anymore. Silence. Then softly, Marissa asked, What are we, Carter? He stepped forward until there was barely space between them. I don't need to define it yet. I just need to keep choosing it. Every day. Her heart pounded. She wanted to believe him. She almost did. But she was also protecting something more than herself now. You can't just show up when it's romantic, she said. You have to show up when Miles has a fever, when I forget to thaw dinner, when life gets boring or hard or both. I will, he said, even when it's inconvenient, especially then. She felt tears prick her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. Instead, she reached past him and opened the cabinet, pulling down 2 mugs, coffee or tea. He blinked, then smiled slowly. Tea. Good, she said. Because the coffee's stale, and if we're doing this, really doing this, you should know that I forget to buy groceries on Tuesdays and burn toast more than a reasonable person should. He laughed, the sound low and warm, filling the quiet apartment with something that felt very close to home. I can live with that. They sat together at the table, steam rising between them, hearts still a little guarded but closer than they'd been in years. It wasn't a grand reconciliation. It was better. It was honest, quiet, unfolding one choice at a time. And in the stillness of that moment, Marissa realized something. She wasn't just rewriting her story. She was finally letting someone help her write it. A soft drizzle painted the Charleston sidewalks as Marissa pushed Miles's stroller down the path near Waterfront Park. The air smelled of salt and wet stone, and the sky was wrapped in a gray quiet that suited her thoughts. It had been a week since Carter showed up at her door with tea and truth. A week of tentative calm. A week of them trying not with fireworks but with little things. Groceries, shared dinners, late-night texts, co-parenting in a way that felt at times startlingly normal. And yet something still hovered. Not doubt exactly. More like a question waiting in the wings. How long will this last? Miles babbled in front of her, pointing to a squirrel darting through a patch of grass. She smiled, reaching into her bag for a snack, when a familiar voice pulled her back. "Well, this is cozy." Marissa froze. Inez Caldwell stood by the iron railing overlooking the harbor, dressed impeccably, as always, in a pale blue trench coat and heels that somehow never got wet. "I'm just out for a walk," Marissa said, keeping her tone even. "So I see." Inez stepped closer. Strolling like a perfect little family again, I assume Marissa locked eyes with her. "You're not going to intimidate me, Inez? Not anymore." "Please," Inez scoffed. "Intimidation is a tool for people who still care about approval. You already made it quite clear you're marching to your own rhythm now." Marissa gave a tight smile. "That's right." Inez's gaze flicked toward Miles, who giggled as he crushed a cracker in his tiny hand. For a moment her expression softened. Then it returned to stone. "My son is not built for mediocrity," she said. "He was raised to lead, to think 10 steps ahead. And he's losing that edge with every step he takes toward this domestic detour. This detour," Marissa said carefully, "is his family." Inez arched a brow. Is it an old comfort dressed in new sentiment? Marissa could have walked away. She wanted to. But something inside her settled instead. A calm she didn't recognize at first until she realized it was certainty. She wasn't the same woman who used to nod and bite her tongue. "He's a better man now than he ever was under your definition of success," she said. "And I won't let you shame him for growing." Inez didn't reply. Her lips parted slightly, but nothing came. Marissa turned the stroller toward the path again. "If you really want to be part of his life, or Miles's, you're going to have to meet us where we are. Not where you think we should be." As she walked away, her hands trembled slightly on the handle. But her steps were steady. Later that evening, Carter arrived at her apartment just after 7, carrying Miles's favorite puzzle and a tired smile. "Long day?" she asked, opening the door. "Long week." He dropped his bag by the door and leaned down to greet Miles, who squealed with joy. As he settled on the rug with the toddler, Marissa watched him quietly. The way he listened, the way he laughed, the way he stayed. She sat across from him, sipping tea, until Carter looked up and asked, "What, I ran into your mother today?" He stilled just slightly. "What did she say?" "Same as always, that you're too important to waste time on this." Carter exhaled slowly. "I'm sorry." "I'm not," Marissa said, "because I didn't flinch. I didn't explain or justify. I just told her the truth." He studied her. "What truth?" "That you're better now, and that I won't apologize for believing it." Carter was quiet, emotion flickering through his eyes. "I don't think I've ever deserved your faith," he said softly. "You haven't?" she replied, equally soft. "But you're earning it now." One day at a time, he reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "I want you to know something," he said. "I've started the process of stepping back just a little from the company. Not disappearing, just making space. I hired a second COO to split responsibilities. It's early, but it's a start." Marissa blinked. "You're really doing that?" "I am," he nodded. "Because I don't want to be a father in passing, or a partner only when it's easy. I want to be present." She swallowed a lump in her throat. "That means everything, Carter." Miles babbled loudly, slapping both hands on the puzzle pieces in front of him. Carter chuckled. And he agrees. They spent the evening wrapped in soft conversation and tiny, joyful interruptions. No big declarations, no perfect moments, just life, full of color and grace, and the slow, steady beat of something healing. By the time Carter left, Marissa felt something shift inside her again. Not doubt, not fear, a deeper, quieter truth. Maybe she was learning to trust the rewrite, not because it promised a perfect ending, but because this time she was helping write it. Sunday mornings had a rhythm in Charleston's slow, honeyed familiar. The scent of cinnamon rolls drifted through Marissa's kitchen, mingling with the quiet hum of Miles's favorite cartoon playing softly in the background. Sunlight stretched across the hardwood floors, and for the first time in a long while, Marissa felt like she wasn't holding her breath. Carter had spent the night, not in some grand, sweeping gesture, but because Miles had come down with a slight fever, and Carter refused to leave until the toddler's cheeks cooled and his breathing steadied. He'd fallen asleep in the armchair with a blanket thrown over him, feet still in shoes, one hand resting on his chest, like he was guarding something fragile. Marissa had watched him from the doorway. Not with disbelief anymore, but with something gentler. Maybe even love. She poured coffee into 2 mugs and walked over gently, tapping his shoulder. "You're going to need a chiropractor if you sleep there again," she said, voice soft. Carter stirred, rubbing his eyes as he blinked up at her. "What time is it?" "Almost 8. He sat up slowly, groaning. "Did Miles sleep finally?" "Around 4. He's still out." Carter leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "I don't know how you've done this alone for so long." She handed him a mug. "Because I had to." He took a sip, then looked up at her. "I'm sorry you did." There was no tension in the words, just truth. She nodded, accepting it, not as closure but as acknowledgement. "I meant what I said," he added. "I'm staying, not just for him, for us." She studied him still in yesterday's clothes, hair, messy eyes, tired but kind. "You're going to have to keep proving that she said not as a warning but a promise." He smiled. "I plan to." They were mid-breakfast when her phone buzzed. "Tanya." "Hey, just saw the Times piece." "You okay?" Marissa's brows furrowed. She tapped the link Tanya sent, scrolling quickly. There it was, an editorial feature titled, "From Boardroom to Backyard Billionaire Carter Caldwell's Surprising Second Act." It was a glowing profile. But it wasn't just about business. It was about him. About them. About Miles. They hadn't even done an interview. The article was framed around Carter's recent decisions to scale back at Caldwell Strategic and a quiet shift toward community investment projects, some of which were rooted directly in Charleston. The garden renovation, donations to local schools, even plans for a family wellness center downtown. There were no photos of Miles, nothing invasive. But there was just enough detail to piece together the story behind the changes. Marissa's stomach tightened. Carter had gone still, reading over her shoulder. "I didn't know they were running that," he said, voice tight. "It must have leaked from the board. Probably someone trying to make sense of why I'm pulling back." Marissa set the phone down. "They're already crafting a narrative," she said. "And we haven't even had a chance to decide ours. I'll call my PR team. Have it taken down." She shook her head slowly. "No, it's not about that. It's fast," he said, finishing the thought. She looked at him, eyes steady. "We've been rebuilding something in private. Carefully. This feels public, exposed, like someone turned on the lights before we were ready." He leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. "I never meant for it to happen like this. I wanted us to be the ones to tell our story." "I know," she said, softer now. "But this changes things." Later that afternoon, they took Miles for a walk along the Battery. The spring breeze rolled off the harbor and tourists moved in small clusters, snapping pictures beneath the moss-covered oaks. A few people recognized Carter. One even nodded and gave a quiet, "loved the piece in the Times" before walking off. Marissa caught the shift in Carter's shoulders. Not embarrassment, but something close. Regret. They sat on a bench facing the water. Miles napped in the stroller, a tiny hat shielding his face from the sun. "I never wanted my name to touch your piece," Carter said suddenly, "but it seems like it keeps doing that." She She reached for his hand, lacing their fingers. "Carter, this isn't about your name. It's about how we carry it." He turned to look at her. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Not of you, of the world that surrounds you, of losing the quiet we've worked so hard to build." "We'll protect it," he said. "Together." She believed him, not because he promised it, but because he looked terrified of losing it, too. They sat in silence, the waves crashing softly in the distance. Maybe their story had stepped into the light. But maybe it was time. Time to stop hiding from the past. Time to let the world see what rebuilding love actually looked like, unpolished, real, earned. And maybe they were strong enough to weather what came next. The rain had just stopped when Marissa stepped out onto the back porch, her bare feet brushing against the damp wood. The garden Carter helped rebuild stretched out before her neatly kept rows of herbs and soft wildflowers climbing the edge of the fence. A robin chirped from the hydrangea bush, shaking water off its feathers. Inside, Miles's laughter echoed through the house as he ran around with Carter pretending to be a superhero. The sound bounced off the walls, bright and full, like music you forgot you missed. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting it all sink in. The quiet, the warmth, the love that didn't announce itself loudly, but sat beside her like an old friend. "Hey." She turned as Carter stepped out, holding 2 mugs. Hot cocoa. Miles demanded it for all of us. She took the mug, their fingers brushing. "Did he assign us superhero names again?" Carter grinned. "You're Mommy Marvel." "I'm Business Dad," which feels like a slight insult. Marissa laughed, shaking her head. "He's not wrong." They sat together on the porch swing, the early evening sky, glowing pale gold clouds still trailing from the earlier storm. After a long sip, Carter leaned back, exhaling deeply. "It's been a year." She looked over at him. Since the call, since I found out I was a father." Her heart slowed at the memory, that sharp, unexpected ring that changed everything. "It feels like another life," she said quietly. "I was so scared then," he admitted. "Not of being a dad, but of being a bad one. Of repeating every cold, distant example I was raised by." "You haven't." "I came close," he murmured. "I almost let fear keep me from this." Marissa turned to face him fully. "You could have run." "You didn't." He paused, then looked down at the cocoa in his hands. "My mother called yesterday." Marissa's stomach fluttered. "And she wanted to meet Miles." She blinked. "Really?" He nodded. "I think..." Seeing the article made her realize she's already missing out. Marissa didn't say anything at first, just let that truth settle between them. "She's not going to change overnight," he added quickly, "and I'm not expecting you to forgive or forget. But I wanted to ask how you feel about it. I told her the decision's not just mine." Marissa looked out over the garden again. A few fireflies had begun blinking through the low branches. "I think if she's willing to come in gently and not try to take over, then maybe Miles deserves the chance to know her. On his own terms." Carter reached over and took her hand. "I'm proud of you," he said quietly. She glanced at him, eyes glinting. "I'm proud of us." A long silence stretched between them. Not empty, just full of all the things that didn't need to be said anymore. "I've been thinking," Carter started again. "I want to put down roots here. Permanently." Marissa raised an eyebrow. "You mean I'm selling the penthouse, buying a place with a yard close to you and Miles? I want him to grow up knowing which porch swing creaks and where the good cookies are hidden." Her throat tightened. "That's a big move." He looked at her serious now. "So is trust. So is forgiveness. But you've given me both. I want to honor that by building a life you don't have to question anymore." Tears welled before she could stop them. She laughed softly, wiping at her cheek. "You always show up with the good lines after Coco." Carter smiled, then leaned in and kissed her temple softly, without urgency. Inside, Miles shouted from the hallway. "Mom, Daddy, come see my tower. It's as big as a real building." Carter stood offering his hand. "Shall we?" She slipped her fingers into his, grounding herself, in the moment. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't a movie ending. But it was real. As they walked inside, side by side, laughter trailing after them, Marissa realized something she hadn't been able to put words to before. Sometimes love doesn't come back as a grand gesture. Sometimes it comes quietly on a rainy afternoon, holding a mug of cocoa and choosing to stay. Again and again. And that choice every single day, that was the story worth telling.